Hello, you're listening to Abstract AF and I'm Sneha Jaswal. This episode is all about books, stories, and for those who did not know, 23rd April is celebrated as World Book Day to promote reading and publishing and as a way to honor authors. The first International Book Day was observed in 1995 and has been an initiative by UNESCO. Avid readers obviously don't need a reason to celebrate a World Book Day, but unfortunately, in the times of Instagram, WhatsApp, TikTok, and all these social media apps, a lot of people have forgotten the joy of reading, the joy of holding a book and getting lost in a story. For so many of us across generations, for centuries around the world, books have been our first love. Not just that, books have been a way of winning over somebody we love. Who can forget the iconic scene from Beauty and the Beast where the Beast tries to woo Beauty with his beautiful, huge, massive library?
I can't believe it. I've never seen so many books in all my life.
You like it?
It's wonderful.
Then it's yours.
Oh, thank you so much.
I mean, obviously, there are problems with the story, but who would not want to be the owner of a huge library collection? Well, here is an interesting fact. Although I don't know if it can be called a fact since a lot of people dispute it, but according to most scholars, a classic work from the 11th century called The Tale of Genji, Genji, The Tale of Genji, written by Japanese author Murasaki Shikibu, is considered the world's first novel. Murasaki was a lady in waiting to Empress Shoshi at the imperial court of Japan, and this classic written by her has intrigued readers around the world. And according to an article in BBC.com, Virginia Woolf had reviewed an English translation of the book for the British Vogue in 1925. Honestly, I didn't even know that Vogue was such an old magazine. In fact, it actually started as a weekly newspaper in 1892 and was based out of New York. It became a monthly magazine a little later, and the British Vogue was launched way back in 1916. Well, coming back to the first novel, there are a few other titles that are often disputed as one of the first novels to ever be written, and I think the strongest contender is a book called The Golden Ass. I was a literature student, and I'm honestly quite ashamed to admit that until I started reading up for this podcast episode, I had never heard of the Golden Ass. It's a Latin book dating back to the 2nd century Rome, and some scholars believe this to be the first novel ever to be written. Well, first novel or not, it sounds ridiculously funny, and I'm seriously considering buying a copy. But it is April 2021. COVID cases are scarily on the rise, at least in my part of the world, and our resident association has cautioned us against ordering non essential things. So, golden ass written on a parcel might not look good for me. Anyway, you have to listen to the description for this book because it sounds hilariously entertaining. The Golden Ass is a unique, entertaining, and thoroughly readable Latin novel, the only work of fiction in Latin to have survived from antiquity. It tells the story of the hero Lucius, whose curiosity and fascination for sex and magic results in his transformation into an ass. After suffering a series of trials and humiliations, he is ultimately returned to human shape by the kindness of the goddess Isis. Simultaneously, a blend of romantic adventure, fable, and religious testament. The Golden Ass is one of the truly seminal works of European literature, of intrinsic interest as a novel in its own right, and one of the earliest examples of the picaresque. How can any literature enthusiast not want to buy this after reading that? The Golden Ass. Order your copy as soon as you can. I'm going to order mine soon, okay? And when I finish reading it, there will be a detailed review on this podcast. Coming back to World Book Day, I think the best way to observe this day is by obviously reading a book or sharing a story. So, for this episode now, I'm going to be sharing a story from my first published book called Death and Darker Realms. It's actually a poetry collection, but the poem that I'm going to recite is written like a historical story. I wrote it when I was 18 and it doesn't have a title, but let us call it The Princess and the Cauldron. The princess of the kingdom was a viewer's delight. Unparalleled beauty, her radiance shamed sun's light. The emperor, whose lands spread far and wide, came to hear of the king's daughter, his pride. He commissioned a painter to confirm the tales. Off went the artist with his brushes and scales. The humble king welcomed the famed painter to his land, and his colors went riot, splashed in sun, sea, and sand. Soon asked the artist for the princess to be painted, and when the hour came, he held his heart lest he fainted. So dazzling was she in all her splendor, a stunning sight, and it wasn't the grandeur. With every brush stroke a little of him somewhere died, an unrequited love that could never be by his side. The princess smiled at the visibly smitten admirer, at which his heart almost broke, and she into laughter. Flushed it broke now, but she regained composure. He went back to his strokes, and then to the emperor. No less effect did it have on the ruler of half the earth, for the first time in his mighty heart took love's birth. Straight he sent a messenger with a simple proposal: your daughter's hand or your land at my disposal. Pat came the reply: name the date for the union. The date soon approaching, but each day felt like a billion. And when they were united, the emperor went mad with glee. His bride was with him finally, in flesh and blood. In mutual love they fell, which swept them like a flood. But soon time played the cruel game of fate. Love fizzled out, but didn't turn into hate. He had his conquests, and she had her jewelry. But for how long could she dwell on just mere finery? He had his ambassadors, and she had her maids. She spoke of silly nothings, while he spoke of raids. She was young, the handsome emperor older. He was serious, reserved, but her much bolder. Sometimes he was too famished to heed to her needs, and the bored young empress was a slave to her needs. When he was out conquering, she didn't know what to do. He made her private gardens and a palace to not make much ado. She got herself a lover, for in boredom lust's hunger had grown. But the emperor had his spies, and the seeds of discord were sown. She had a private palace where the two often met. The royal kitchen as the meeting place was always set. The emperor never went there, and her maids were loyal. But the whispers went through. Someone proved disloyal. The wily emperor had a very simple plan in mind, for now he knew where the traitors he could find. Back before time, he came from a conquest, and rushed to her palace unannounced. Startled, the princess asked her lover to hide in a cauldron, and when her husband arrived in the kitchen, on her he pounced. "I missed you, my love," he said sweetly as he looked around, but what his eyes searched for was nowhere to be found. But soon he knew, and a smile appeared on his face. "I'm very hungry," he said, as he held her in tight embrace. He said he wanted her to cook right then and there. He summoned her maids to help her in the affair. He insisted he wanted to watch the whole damn affair. He asked them to boil water in the huge black cauldron. The shocked empress said, "It's too big, not that cauldron." "But I like things grand," he reiterated his instruction. The anxious lover clenched his teeth, awaiting destruction. The terrified loyal maids poured water in the cauldron. Dumbfounded, helpless, wide were the empress's eyes drawn, as the maids put on the fire for the vessel to be heated. Terror was in every heart except the proud ruler, all of them witness to the death of the secret lover. 1,000 hells he saw at once and slowly died. The empress let out a shriek as she slightly cried. The last thing he pictured was her in the portrait he had painted, and how he had to clutch his heart, lest he fainted. The emperor taught the empress her lesson and had retribution. The repentant wife went running into his arms, her only solution. The royal couple soon found love again at the cost of another. He was all but forgotten, the silly, smitten painter. Well, that was the poem, the story poem from my book, Death in Darker Realms. Do check the book out if you like reading poetry. And that's all for this episode. Hope you enjoyed listening. Talk to you in the next one.